unless we wanted them to. It was possible to push through with enough determination, but it would slow the person down enough to give us time to gather the pack and deal with the threat accordingly. The pack was recovering about as well as I was from that night. Blake was holed up with Jean in their cabin. From the not-so-quiet whispers I'd heard echoing through the house, Jean hadn't had her baby, even though she'd been adamant she was going to. To make matters worse, she was now overdue, and Blake was going out of his mind trying to keep her happy. Gray hadn't left his room, being just as stubborn as I was. Davian had quickly moved across to my old house to get out of his firing line. I couldn't blame him. Gray wasn't going to let go of what he'd done that night any time soon. Tanner and River were doing their best to run interference, but it didn't sound like it was going too well. The Alpha swung from enraged to depressed. I knew I should be at his side, helping him through this, but for once I was thinking about myself, and as selfish as it was, I needed this to heal. Nash was also holed up in his room, caring for Holly. She still hadn't woken, so he hadn't left his mate's side. He was just as much of a mess as I was. It was like we had this weird type of solidarity going on. He was the only one who seemed to understand my current madness. Of course, it was only because he was hoping for a solution, but I couldn't blame him. Aidan had become my constant shadow. I'd thought my mates were bad with their persistent badgering, trying to get me to eat, to sleep, to do anything apart from what I was doing. I hadn't even noticed Aidan was watching over me at first. It was only when I caught his scent after Tanner had opened the library window that I realized what he'd been doing. He'd been camped out beneath the window, watching over me. What exactly it was he was watching out for, I didn't know. In short, the pack was falling apart. We tiptoed around each other, so overwhelmed by our own pain that we were powerless to help one another. Tanner and River were doing their best to keep everyone going. As terrible as it sounded, the fact they were managing to show the lie of normality made me start to resent them a little bit. Their constant hovering, persistent attempts to assist, weren't helping. It was like they were all waiting for me to explode in a ball of crazy. I wasn't going to lie. It was a distinct possibility. But I felt like I was on the verge of something, like there was something there, just out of my grasp, and if I could read one more book, learn one more spell, then I'd finally get it. The dreams I kept having of Maverick spurred me on to keep trying. Who better to accompany me on this road to insanity than the man who'd been willing to give everything to try and keep me safe?
2. Tanner. She hasn't slept for days, and I can't even remember the last time I saw her pay any attention to the kids, River whispered, as we both watched Calli through the doorway of the library. It felt like stepping over the threshold was making a declaration, an invasion into her grief. My eyes flickered across to my childhood friend standing stoically by my side before being pulled back to her like the beacon she was. River watched over her, like we all had, giving her the space to work through what happened that night, to work through her feelings of having to deal with a loss so soon after her parents. Calli sat at the desk, her head bent over yet another book, with one hand resting on top of her mother's journal. Since we'd been defeated, she'd been consumed to the point where nothing else mattered. She was determined to become what she believed she needed to be, and none of us wanted to stop her. There was a hole in the pack where he was supposed to be. All of us were kind of floating around the pack house, not quite sure how to deal with what had happened. She's working through this the best way she knows how, I told him. I could feel the lump forming in my throat as I spoke. Calli at least had found a way to deal with her pain, no matter how self-destructive it was turning out to be. Me? I was barely holding on. I felt like I was clinging to the edge of sanity by my fingernails, and I needed someone to reach out and save me. But I didn't have anyone, or at least right now, it didn't feel like I did. I needed my mate. We all did. But were our selfish needs enough to tear her away from what she was doing in an attempt to try and cope herself? The rush of running feet pulled me from my thoughts as my heart leapt into my throat. Attack. They were back. We're under attack. Jean rushed round the corner of the corridor, her eyes wild with panic, holding her baby belly with one hand as she puffed out each breath. "The children," she gasped, leaning heavily.